as a Florida man, what did you think about Canada before you moved here? Like, what did you know?
As you probably, I assume most Americans know nothing about Canada. And
Yeah.
that assumption is exceptionally true.
For Florida?
For all of the United States.
Yes.
I mean, I can't speak for like Michigan and
Well, I lived
New
in
York
Philadelphia and Seattle,
Philly,
and they're pretty close to the border. And a lot of people ask me questions like, "What side of the road do you drive on? Are you a democracy?"
everything I knew about Canada was from South Park.
Yeah. Okay.
Big
Yeah.
thing. And actually
blame Canada.
pretty on the nose, to be honest.
What?
And then of all things,
Yeah.
Degrassi,
Oh yeah, Degrassi. Yeah, legit.
our sex ed
Yeah.
in the state of Florida was
Yeah.
just basically watching Degrassi.
Alex, who's in the studio with us today?
So today on the podcast, we have Graeme Brown, co-founder and CEO of QReserve. Now it's really funny because I wrote the notes last night and I wrote from Hamilton, Ontario, and I had typed the Hammer. And then today Sacha was like, and from the Hammer. I'm like, oh, this is, it's a good, very few cities in Ontario have a nickname like that.
It's true.
I like it. I like, I often say that I come from the Hammer. But I wouldn't tell people, international audiences, they would get confused and maybe worry about, I don't know, violence or something. So
Yeah.
The Hammer is
The
otherwise
Hammer
known
and the
as
Sioux,
Hamilton, Ontario.
Yeah.
that's right.
So thanks for making the trek. You were here for the team meeting, the Communitech team meeting today.
Talking about QReserve.
A little bit. I think the idea was to get a bunch of the founders that you guys support up in front of the entire team, right? And answer some basic questions and then kind of like open it up. Because like I know that like from a growth coach perspective, they get to see the journey, right? Like they're like that direct kind of point of interface. But a lot of the stuff that founders like myself and Brandon, my co-founder, benefit from is a product of the larger team, right? So it's nice for them to see like what the impact is of the work that you guys are doing. So happy to share my thoughts.
Yeah, what's your experience with Communitech so far?
It's great, and like the one thing that like is maybe a little bit different with QReserve's relationship with Communitech is Communitech's a customer of ours as well. So
I use it every day.
Yeah, I get to be in front of users, right? And like our customer base is global. So we don't get the opportunity to visit customers regularly. But like I come here for events and to participate in a wide variety of programming. So it's a great opportunity to kind of just check in and see how things are going. So
I've met a bunch of the QReserve team at our last breakfast event. They were lovely.
Well, and for those who don't know, like what is QReserve and what is the product and who are the customers?
Yeah, I guess I should talk about that. Yeah, so QReserve is a software platform that organizations use to manage their valuable resources. And resources is a term that has an open definition, but oftentimes it falls into one of the categories of either like equipment. So we've got universities and colleges and hospitals that use us to kind of manage their really expensive research and kind of clinical equipment. Then we've got customers like Communitech who use us for managing their facility, specifically meeting rooms and spaces and services. That's kind of what we do. And so we got a wide footprint across the globe, lots of kind of top 100 universities and hospitals that are all using us in a little bit of a different way. And we've been around for 10 years, but I wouldn't say that we have the nut fully cracked. But what's interesting is that like different people have different priorities about like what they think is the best way to be sharing with conditions their valuable resources. And we're getting some great exposure to different ways smart people are wanting to manage things and leverage the information that comes from the system. Like how's it being used and what's the value?
Yeah, so we use it for meeting room management, and it's unique for us because we're a co-working space. So it's not just Communitechers that are using meeting rooms or the podcast renting out the podcast studio. It's also our founder companies and our member companies. I'm going to say that again. It's also our founder member companies and tenants that rent the space. So a lot of our internal email system doesn't cross over with the person who's renting a desk. So we both need a sort of third party system management so that we're not double booking a meeting room. And QReserve is like the perfect solution for that.
Love hearing that.
Which is such a unique use case, but
it does seem like a unique use case, but we're finding that it's not that unique. And the one big thing is, and Communitech's a great example, and love having Communitech as a customer. But the reason why that we were ultimately brought in initially was there was a number of different types of users in Communitech. You've got your staff, and then you have tenants, and you have founders that aren't located here but want to come and use some of the facilities. And there are different pathways that each of those groups of users need to follow. There might be conditions or restrictions to outside organizations versus like a staff member here. I need that meeting room. I need it for a half of a day because we're working on something really important. I don't think there's anyone in your organization that's telling you, no, you can't use that. Naturally, like it's a resource that should be there. But from a outside company perspective, who is a member of Communitech that wants to leverage a boardroom for a indeterminate amount of time, maybe there are, and there were conditions, and maybe you don't want someone booking a room all day, every day, and you don't want to have a staff member have to kind of manage that. You want to have a system where you can develop some simple or complex rules and allow the system to do the administration. You control what those rules are, but ultimately you aren't manually having to do that work. The system does that for you.
And so, it's not just rooms either, right? Like this could be, if you're a lab, it could be a piece of equipment or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And oftentimes like where we get injected into customers is where there's a combination of those things. There's equipment, there's space, there are services, there are requirements for data to be captured at the point when someone's requesting access, and to have all of that contained, and then to allow the system to access some of that information and to make some determinations based on those rules. So again, resource management. What is resources? Well, resources can be anything you want it to be.
So what, like, if I take you back to the beginning, you and your co-founder, when you were developing this product, did you start out with that sort of problem that you were trying to solve, or did it pivot or evolve, or how, like, what's your journey like?
Yeah. So like, I would say there's been definitely an evolution. I am not an original founder. I kind of came on in the first year or so of QReserve's existence. QReserve started as a small software packet that was developed by my co-founder, Brandon Obby, at McMaster University. He was a staff member there. He was working at a fantastic facility that, had some research requirements. They wanted to do a significant, materially large study on something, and they needed fancy, amazing equipment along with funding to kind of ultimately help them do that research. And so they had received a very generous grant from CFI, a Canadian foundation funded by the federal government that ultimately helps underwrite some of this research and development work. I received that funding, bought a bunch of really amazing equipment, and the people that were running that facility, they ultimately wanted to let everyone else on campus know about the fact that that equipment was there. And they wanted to create a pathway for people to, one, be able to see what it is, and then to be able to access it. And there were rules just similar to what you would imagine. But ultimately, that was something that was a little bit different because I would say the norm was, and maybe still is, that when research facilities inside of a publicly funded post-secondary institution get funding, that sometimes like those pieces of equipment stay with that institute, and that like no one really gets to see it and have access to it.
Which is a bad thing, right? Is that what you're leading at?
I am in the camp that that's a bad thing. I like sharing.
Yeah, you're not a gatekeeper.
No. Well, like I think in certain circumstances that gates are appropriate, but like there are conditions to it. Ultimately, my belief is that there's always a condition that someone would be willing to share something with someone else. It might be very complex. There might be like 100 boxes that you need to check. It might require that person pay you for it. Maybe it's a wickedly large sum of money. Whatever that is, like there are conditions that someone would go from naturally saying no to saying yes.
Like a private jet.
That's right. Yeah.
Or my toddler sharing toys with my other toddler.
Yeah. Like I know that as a parent, I talk to my children about sharing often. And so it's kind of neat that the worlds blend there. But ultimately, the software was developed for that single lab and facility. And that others on the McMaster campus heard about it, were like, I would like to put that into their lab. And so it started proliferating out that way. Then, like as academics do, we're talking with others in their network, and some of those people in their network were outside of McMaster. And so it started to then spread outside of there. It was still a McMaster product. It was still a McMaster bit of technology. Brandon spun QReserve out, left McMaster, founded QReserve, and then kind of started that trajectory. And I met Brandon shortly after at Hamilton's version of Communitech, Innovation Factory. They had a little showcase. Brandon was at a booth with some pamphlets, and I was really compelled by kind of his vision and kind of what he had built, and kind of joined on. And then we started taking QReserve from like a small little idea, a very kind of tiny in comparison to like what it can do now, like a tiny set of features and functions that we're providing value. And then it's like, okay, well, what's next?
Well, no, I was going to say, but even like that idea of spinning out of something like that, I think there's a lot of companies and products spinning out of other things is always one of the, I think, the most interesting founder stories, because they're unexpected startups. And Slack is an example of that, where it started as an internal communication tool for a video game studio.
It did?
Yeah.
I didn't know
they
that.
They built it, for their team, and then everyone liked it. And then I don't know if the video game ever came out or what game studio it was, but yeah, they launched it. And then look at it now. Now it's... I'll sit here and go, oh, another Slack notification. So I don't think anyone says that about QReserve, because they're like, oh, good, now my resource is available. So it must be a happier user outcome.
Graeme, what's your professional background? Like, what skill set did you have that you brought to QReserve?
Okay, yeah, so that's a great question.
Does this feel like a job interview? It's too much.
No, it doesn't.
It kind of sounds like fucking stupid Napoleon Dynamite.
What's your biggest strength and weakness?
What are your skills?
Swordplay is definitely my strength, right?
Oh, jeez.
I'm prepared for getting sent back in time and being on a pirate ship.
That's great.
I wish, actually. I'm lying.
No. Okay.
I project. Like I talk about things that I would like to be.
I think you could kill a man with a sword. Having met you for
I wouldn't be a murdering pirate. I think I would be like a maimer, right? Like where like they maybe have a little scar, like to know that the interaction like that remember. I want it. Yeah, and then hopefully it would turn them around, and maybe they would join a merchant vessel and do do things on the up and up, right?
These are Graeme's 3 a.m. thoughts.
Yeah, some of them for sure. Yeah, but no, I even forget the question that was originally asked.
What did you bring? Like, what did you bring to QReserve? So you met the founder at a showcase at McMaster University.
Yeah.
No, sorry, at Innovation Factory, and it was like a match made in heaven. Why?
Yeah. So previous to that, I had worked for the provincial government, and I worked at a couple of different ministries, and I did this while I was a kind of investor in some other startup technology companies. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I also wanted to have a family, and I knew that like kind of diving in 100% in that would create a little bit of financial uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I will get a day job. I will work in an organization that I can get exposure to lots of problems and opportunities and a wide variety of different things. But that would also be okay with me having another passion and to be able to contain those two. And so a government job in a non-managerial role, like where you have an objective that you need to go in there and do a job, and that I could say, you know what, I'm going to be excellent at that job from 9 to 5. And from 5 to 9, I can do the other stuff, and I can be able to learn, get some of that stability, but then also to support a company and to not be a drain on that company that I'm an investor in. So to not draw salary. So essentially you get the best of my knowledge. You don't get it full time. But then I can be kind of building and doing stuff on the other end. So when I was with the province, one of the ministries that I was working for, the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, they assigned me as the lead of the procurement of an asset management information system. So the government...
Oof. Say that again?
Asset management information system. So essentially it's the software system that's housing all the information about the condition of their buildings and other type of infrastructure.
Okay.
So inside of the Ministry of Tourism, they have a bunch of different agencies. One of them is the Metro Toronto Convention Center.
Yep.
One of them is the Ottawa Convention Center. One of them is the Niagara Parks Commission with all of the different buildings, all that cool stuff. And the ministry funds the capital maintenance and rehabilitation of those assets. Mm-hmm. And they wanted, not just the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, but the provincial government wanted a comprehensive set of data on all of the liabilities related to all of those different pieces of infrastructure. So when they're doing their capital plan, that they would be able to say, okay, like we know the state of repair of all these different facilities.
Yeah, you're like auditing them and seeing what needs to be done over the next X amount of years.
Yeah, and then as well, like just realistically, what's an appropriate amount of money that we should be putting to those things. So I was doing that, and I was helping build that, and I was helping procure that, but there was a limit. Like those systems cared about buildings. Like there's 100 windows. They were put in 2013, and they have a 50-year life. And so we should make sure that we know that in 50 years, we should have the money to replace these things. But they fell short on equipment. Like they didn't do that. Those systems didn't cover those lower value, high transaction ones where like the people need to be kind of keeping track of who's doing what.
Like a printer?
It could be, yeah. They like that kind of equipment wasn't in that asset management information system. It just didn't belong there.
Yep.
But like there was a lot of value and insights around that. And so I'm like, I think this is the future, but I think this is a wicked limitation of these kinds of systems. And I can see why this doesn't fit in that kind of system. And when I saw Brandon showcasing that, I'm like, this just makes sense, not just for those buildings, but for everything. I think, as we move away from just thinking we need to own everything ourselves and buying things and not worrying about the longevity of that thing, there's like being a consumer and buying a new phone every 2 years, that's not sustainable. And like, what is that longer play? I think the longer play in the future, like we're going to care about the quality of things we purchase, and we're going to buy it knowing that we hope it's around for 10 or 20 years, and that we want to keep track of like who's using it so that we know if we need more and all other kind of fun stuff.
It's like creating a sharing economy and then creating infrastructure that supports that.
Yeah. And so like when QReserve originally was founded, and maybe when I walked to that table, one of the things that Brandon used to describe QReserve, because this is how our customers were describing us to their colleagues, they were calling us the Airbnb of research equipment.
There you go.
So like this is a place that you can go, and especially if a larger version of an organization like a department or an entire university adopted QReserve. Back in the day, the idea was that like this could be, we could have all of our equipment listed and like everyone could see, and all of the conditions for like who should be able to see it, who should be able to use it, how much it should cost, what kind of information is required in advance, all of that could be housed in something like QReserve. And that's true. But like that also scares people, especially academics. They're not like, I don't want my research lab to be an Airbnb of anything, right? I don't want any coming in, right?
Yeah.
And so like ultimately people are using it that way. We don't frame it that way, but a lot of it was around, okay, like what's the reason why people don't want to share? And oftentimes it's because they think it's too complicated to manage it, because they're thinking of managing it manually. But if there's a system that you can put all of your instructions into, you can create all of those really complicated rules, and the system does the administration, you're in control, right? You're deciding what that system does for you.
Yeah.
You're just creating those routines and allowing this system to go and do it. And if the system is easy enough that you can go in and change it on a whim in a day without having to contact your IT group or contact an external vendor and pay $100,000 to have it reconfigured, if we can make it easier for you to have access to that as a administrator or a user, then like maybe it'll take off, and it's starting to take off. So
Communitech's going to use QReserve for this room in that way. because this is the podcast room, and we
Yeah.
just don't want anybody coming in here. And there's things you need to know before you come here. That you need a micro SD card.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, you're
We
shit
had
out of luck.
we had two of the best AV people in the game in the Waterloo region set up this podcast room, and it's state of the art, and it should be open to members.
It will be.
Yeah, to
2025.
record the pod.
It could be. This episode might come out in 2025, so
Yeah,
it might be now.
The
It might
future
be
is
right
now.
We don't know.
That must be an exciting thing about kind of hosting a podcast and knowing that's going to come out in the future. So you can kind of be talking about the future today.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's important for
but
me.
if I mention the Canada Post strike, it'll hopefully be resolved
let's hope.
by the time this episode
If it's
airs.
still going on, we got bigger problems. I like to think of every episode as timeless. Really, a timeless piece.
I'm trying to think of a joke. To be honest, that's what this face is
I was
giving.
trying to think of the piece of lab equipment, and I used to make jokes about it all the time, and I can't think of what it was. It spins, and they put test tubes in it.
I am the worst co-founder from QReserve to be on this call because Brandon's the academic and he knows that stuff. Gary, are you talking about some sort of smaller centrifuge kind of?
Centrifuge.
Okay.
Centrifuge.
I hope that's it.
I'm not a science girly.
You ever see if they're in a lab on a TV show and
Yeah,
they go in and
my
they're like,
only reference
whatever, they
is-
got to mix something, they put in the centrifuge. Like if we got to make the cure, and they put it in and they spin it, and we had an old podcast studio upstairs,
Yeah, Phil's closet.
and a certain place, an organization that had a lab with equipment in it, wanted to use a podcast studio. I'm like, we could trade.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean we could trade? I'm like, well, you've got a full lab down there, right? And they're like, yeah, we got a lab. I'm like, you got a centrifuge? And like, yeah. I'm like, can I use a centrifuge? And they're like,
Absolutely not.
why do you want to use it? And I was like, well, I have a theory.
Oh no.
And my theory was that you could put a smoothie in it and separate the smoothie back to its initial ingredients.
Components.
Yeah. And they're like, that's not what a centrifuge does. And I'm like, we don't know until we find out. That's why it's called a theory.
Yeah.
Like science, my friends.
Physics.
And needless to say,
You did not get access to the
I
centrifuge.
was banned. And not unbanned, but I've never got a chance to do it.
The last,
One day.
I
Even if
think
you
I think
made
that
one.
I think that stream of research needs more exploration. I do.
Smoothie
Right?
We
research?
know that someone has used a centrifuge to make a smoothie.
Or to deconstruct one, you
Or,
mean?
or either way,
Go back
who
in time.
knows? Who knows, right? I don't know anything about science.
I don't know
Podcasting
anything.
Really?
seems like very kind of tied into time travel almost because
Yeah.
that seems to
You
be
can find out.
You
talking
know,
about things in the future. Is it the future or is it today? Like when does a smoothie become a smoothie and how
There
can it
are,
unbecome a smoothie?
There are some people listening to this episode in the future, which is now, which is the present, who knows? And they're like, yeah, we remember that. And that's why you're banned. And I might get banned again.
do you think the centrifuge people listen to the podcast?
You never know. I mean, the people who had the lab know who they are.
I think there's a small population of centrifuge people out there that are like in your camp 100%. And they maybe are afraid to be vocal about it because the majority doesn't like the idea of taking a smoothie back to its roots.
The science establishment is anti-smoothie deconstruction,
It just seems like,
reconstruction.
I mean, even if it fails, we still win.
We used
'Cause
to learn something.
it's smoother.
That's academia, right? You're an outcome. We're looking for outcomes. We're looking to learn what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no success or failure. It's like, does it work or does it not work?
So are you full-time QReserve now?
Yes. And love it. And we got
How big is the team?
We have 8 right now, and we'll probably be. I don't know. I was gonna say double by next year, but really we're growing as our customers require us to be bigger, right?
Well, that was going to be my next question too, because you talked about you have customers around the world.
Yeah.
What is that like? So for a lot of founders, especially in Canada, cracking the local market's hard enough. Cracking into the U.S. is like the kind of the golden goose. I don't know, golden goose, golden egg, whatever. You want to do it. You want to get into the U.S. How many countries is QReserve in?
You know what? That's a great question that I don't have a exact answer to, but I would say a lot that it would require a little bit of work to kind of list them all out.
More than Canada and the U.S.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
But what's that like? Just from a sales process, from an customer support, because you're probably dealing with multiple time zones, you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions in terms of licensing and taxation and billing and everything else. Like how with an 8-person team, it seems like you wouldn't think you could support multiple geographies.
Yeah, so like we've been bootstrapping QReserve for 10 years now, and so like the quantity of customers we have like weren't all there at the beginning. And so if you take a 10-year journey and you break it down into chunks, even if there were 100 countries, you're looking at 10 countries a year or a country a month, right? And like it becomes a little bit more manageable that way. But ultimately, like how do we do it? Well, like one, we primarily, we support in English. We aren't multilingual. And for a lot of our customers, that's okay because a lot of them are in post-secondary. And, if it's from, Asia or Europe or Africa or South America, like we're dealing with super brilliant people and they tend to have a quality that I don't have, which is like being unilingual. I am English only. I'm desperately trying to get better at French through my children and their journey through the French immersion school system. But for the most part, English is that kind of common business language. And like we aren't trying to go into any of those markets. We've been pulled into there. And so that's really helped is that like no one saw our advertisement in Italy and it's like, oh, we need QReserve calling us up. We are typically getting injected into an opportunity because someone already knows about us and they already know that they want us. So there really hasn't been a ton of work there, but there are time zone issues and we don't have 24-hour coverage, but we are very upfront with what we are and what we do. And we try desperately to respond as quick as possible. And our customers seem to think that the customer service we provide is great. And so we're trying to just maintain that bar. And as we get bigger and as we get more companies in a specific jurisdiction, there'll be likely a great business case to either have people located there or to like have a kind of more regional approach to maybe say, okay.
I know a plug. When you want people located somewhere.
I was just thinking this. Yeah, we've got a program for that. It's called Communitech Outpost. So if you want to grow in another country, we can help you navigate that landscape as an employer of record. So we help with like onboarding, offboarding, understanding the tax code, understanding the legal liability of hiring or firing or building a team. People tend to use it for all sorts of things, but like sales and developers in other countries are some of the big ones. And it's all over the world. It's
a lot of countries.
It's a lot of countries. At one point, the
100.
list was like 50 plus.
It's 50 plus.
I don't honestly. I should know because I've literally, as a graphic designer, had to take a world map and highlight every single country that we were in at one point. But I can't remember what it is now.
Does Karen Clink?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm very familiar with that and with her, and she's
Karen Clink is the best.
Super passionate about it, and when we are at that level, that in my mind is what the default is, unless there's a better solution. You guys have created something that I think is really excellent.
It's no better solution than Communitech Outpost.
I haven't seen it.
Alex is laughing.
No, there isn't. But I also like the fact that we've just paid the bills for the podcast. So
yeah, Karen, give me some money. Just kidding.
Why don't they sponsor this show?
I don't know. I'm just a co-host.
I know where they sit.
There's some great ideas coming out here, like a
thanks.
Smoothie separation. Yeah.
So you're bootstrapping, you're growing. What does 2025? How do you find? Let me rephrase that. How do you define success in 2025? Like, what would if we were sitting here doing another episode in
Next
December
year.
of 2025? What would you want to be celebrating?
What does future Graeme say? Yeah. I'm so glad that past Graeme did this.
That's a great question. So what I would say, the past 10 years, I think we've been building the foundation for QReserve, and having a brilliant co-founder like Brandon, who started off in academia and is the kind of person that doesn't want to say we can do something unless we can definitely do it and we have like the receipts to prove it. We've been working with organizations, large and small, for a while, and we have a good idea of what they need. And what is interesting is that like they're starting to evolve in a sense that when we would we'd be doing work with a university, we wouldn't be working with the entire university. We'd be working with a lab that was a part of a department or a faculty that was a part of something else. And so like we're dealing with like a beachhead into that larger organization.
Yeah, quite siloed, I'm sure.
It was. But like I think that what is happening is that what those individual kind of small components of that larger organization have been doing, and the kind of information that they can surface from a system like QReserve, as well as like the efficiency savings and all of that kind of fun stuff, is trickling up. And so what we're starting to see now are organizations wanting to kind of bring in QReserve at an enterprise level. And so like we have a couple large global enterprise customers who have really taught us about the kinds of things that we need to do to make sure that not only are we satisfying like the users and administrators, the people that are in the system that are using it all of the time, but the senior leaders, and like what's the data that they need that is going to be injected in those business cases to help them like build that business case to expand or grow or to add new things or to kind of get a new building or add a new facility or all of that other kind of fun stuff. How do they do that? We're starting to see a desire for QReserve in a bigger instance. And so the last year, 2024, we've been calling our big build year. And so it's been preparing for QReserve to be out there and ready for enterprise in a very systematic and easy way. How do we make it easier for 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people to become experts in something as comprehensive as QReserve, and to like have the confidence to bring it in front of their enterprise and to say, this is the kind of thing I think we should be adopting at a larger scale, and what kind of support do we need to be able to provide to those organizations to do that. And so I think a successful 2025 is to have a bunch of new enterprise customers, and those can be people that have come to us. Maybe we've picked up on an RFP where they're trying to do something really big, and we're like, hey, we can help you right from the beginning. Or what I think is more likely is the graduation of some of our smaller deployments inside of a larger organization, and be preparing them to take that next step where it's like, okay, we're in 3 facilities. Now the entire faculty wants it across 25 different facilities.
Yeah.
Or, like the university is saying, or the college wants it. They want to make this a standard that like we have access to this kind of information, that we have rules and procedures about how things are happening, and that we have it standardized. I would be happy to talk about that and the further smoothie conversation in a year. But yeah, that's what I think. And that's kind of where things are trending for us, and it's exciting. But it will require us to grow to support those organizations. So like we've got a plan. We kind of are envisioning how it could roll out, some different scenarios about, continued slow growth, or like what happens if a government organization decides that they want to facilitate a larger connected ecosystem. Like how would we help facilitate that? And how do we get that message that this is something that QReserve, a Canadian company that is considered like one of the best in the world in resource management, that we can help facilitate that. So that's what we see, and that's what we're preparing for. But we're happy to continue on the trajectory that we are right now, which is, finding people that like need something that we can do really well, and like working together on helping them do it.
I love it.
Sounds good. We'll check in a year.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's been
my
awesome,
pleasure,
man. Yeah. It's great to meet you in person.
Yeah. QReserve. I use it every day.
I brought swag for you guys, but
Oh my
it got
God.
picked over by some of your colleagues.
Ugh. Give me names right
Those
now.
Jerks.
But like our t-shirts are top style things. And
Who's your t-shirt vendor? Do you know?
I think Brand Boulevard is the
Brand Boulevard out of Hamilton.
Out of Hammertown.
I think they're out of St. Catharines or something like that.
because it's they're connected with
Sorry,
Dylan's.
I also do swag procurement here, so I'm always got my eye out.
We should talk about that. But in order to do that well, you got to know sizes. So I will collect your t-shirt size, and we'll make sure that we got packages for both of you
thanks.
guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
But you got to wear it every day. That's the
That's
condition.
chill.
Every
Okay.
single day.
New uniform.
Done.
Repping QReserve.
Easy.
I would,
No problem.
or at least like once a week, but commit to that.
Specifically
Your
when,
favorite day, like whatever your favorite day is of the week.
in front of potential customers.
Yes. When
Doesn't-
we're at the
we're
Smoothie
the road-
Accelerator,
we're
we
the
will
road
both be
show.
wearing our
Yeah.
QReserve t-shirts.
I'm going to be there with you. Like I think that's a venture that we all have to,
Yes.
to join
It's
in.
the next startup.
Alex, you should be the CEO because you have the vision, you
I
have
have the vision for it.
yeah, the passion.
Science smoothies.
I'm shaking my head over
I
here.
know.
It's like the world's longest dad joke.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a bit. You got to commit to the bit.
I do commit to it. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Graeme.
It was my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Alex, I got to tell you about Communitech.
Tell me.
Communitech is an innovation hub in Waterloo Region. We're located in downtown Kitchener. We help founders start, grow, and succeed. We've been around for 27 years, and we help founders with tech founders with building their best teams and supporting them with talent, like workintech.ca, with access to markets, examples being our fast track programs, and capital, all things capital, prepping to get ready to raise, and community. We throw great parties. We really know how to gather and bring people together. So if you're Waterloo Region or Toronto startup or scale-up founder and you want to learn more about Communitech, you can come on over to communitech.ca or the socials at Communitech.
Who's our other sponsor?
Oh my God, let me tell you about Elevate IP. Elevate IP is it's a federal program, and it's we are a facilitator of that program essentially. It's ourselves, Communitech, partnering with North Forge out of Manitoba and Invest Ottawa out of Ottawa. And we help founders educate and essentially learn and execute on protecting their intellectual property. And I have Alex, I have a legal disclaimer I need to tell you about. Communitech, North Forge Technology Exchange, and Invest Ottawa are corporations incorporated under the laws of Ontario, Manitoba, and are not agents of the Crown. And Elevate IP is accepting applications for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts April 2025. So you can go over to communitech.ca, slide on over to Elevate IP portal from there, and you can start up your application and learn more about it.
Get those patents.
Yeah. Protect your intellectual
Protect it,
property.
don't neglect it. Thanks for listening as always. And if you ever have any questions or comments or suggestions for guests or topics, you can always reach out to us on the social media at Communitech on all the major platforms. Although I don't have access to any of them, so I don't really check. So I don't really know.
Yeah. So
I mean, Tina would tell us, I guess.
yeah, and hopefully Tina would tell us. Tina, I hope you're telling us.
What if Tina's like hoarding all these things? And she's got a list. She's like, I'm going to give it to him one day.
Yeah. We're here. We're ready.
We'll find out. All right. Thanks, Tina.
Bye.